Hello, everybody. Welcome. It is 2:03, so we're going to get started. Today, we're going to talk about climate risk governance and how this relates to TCFD, IFRS S2, disclosures you might need to be writing for SB 261, and so on. This is a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to go over who we are, just give you some context, what's expected of you, what you might do to engage your board, how you might engage management, give you a few examples of how companies report on this, and then talk through a little bit about how Beehive helps. Feel free to ask questions throughout. So who are we? Quick introduction. My name is Adriel. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Beehive. Beehive helps our clients, folks like DocuSign and the Trade Desk and Asana, publish their climate-related financial risk reports. So we do a lot of work in governance within that. So what's expected here? I want to take a look together at the TCFD guidance. We'll switch over to the IFRS S2 guidance, sort of the elevated next step of that, and then go from there. But TCFD, there's basically two questions that you need to answer related to governance. And just as a reminder, the TCFD is it's called the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, sort of the framework on which all these regulations like SB 261 or CSRD or the ones in Australia, AASB, they're all built on this thing. So the two questions you need to answer are: what are your board's oversight of climate-related risks and opportunities? And describe management's oversight in assessing these risks and opportunities. Those are the first two questions out of 11 total questions that you need to respond to. And so they go into a little bit about like what is the process and the frequency by which these board committees review this. Do they have any, do they consider these climate issues when making decisions? And then for management, they might look at like what people are involved in this, what levels of executive, what roles are involved in this, and then how management actually monitors these issues. Like what does the process look like? So this is the TCFD, and just for some context, the TCFD recommendations came out in 2017. This is an updated guidance from 2021. But then in 2022, I think, or 23, the ISSB, this organization, took over the TCFD, and they issued just some additional clarity around governance. And so, oops, don't print it, but zoom in. Just to highlight a couple parts of it. Some of it's the same, which governance body oversees this. And disclose a couple of additional things. So, are there references or mandates related to that body? So, have you implemented this into your board governance charters? How do you determine whether you have appropriate skills and competencies? That's relatively new. So, have you done a board training about climate risks? And so, I'll give you a few examples of that. And some of the rest of this is the same. How often do you review this? How do they take it into account? And then on the management side, all very similar, but they want to know a little bit about controls and procedures to support this. So like what's being done on what cadence. So that's a little bit about like what you actually have to do for reporting. We have this blog post. You can just find it, beehiveclimate.com/climate risk governance. I think it'll come up, but I'll send it to everybody. And I'll give you some guidance about establishing board oversight and management oversight. And a little bit of guidance about boards is oftentimes, I'll go into this a little bit more in a moment, you have the audit committee involved and the non-gov committee involved on your board. And these committees are meeting quarterly if this is super material, or if they're not as material, maybe annually, just in whatever annual meeting, they quickly review these climate related risks and opportunities. We'll touch upon discussions in a moment. Your ESG steering committee is your management committee. You can call this whatever you want. I've seen it called a CSR committee or a ESG committee or sustainability committee. Basically, it's a group of people in your company who have some responsibility for tracking these risks and basically notifying, backing up in your report that, yeah, we have people, and it's not interns, who are involved in assessing whether these risks are relevant for us. And these are a few of the roles you might want involved there. Just some quick context. I did a review of about 15 15 disclosures. I ran up 15 disclosures. 11 of those 15 have their nominating governance committee involved in this. Those are the ones doing the actual work of reviewing, do they just matter? Do we need to mitigate them? Do we need to elevate them to the level of material? And then your audit committee, almost the same amount, 10 of those 15 reference the audit committee as well. And those are the ones kind of looking over the numbers. Is there a risk that our carbon emissions are not done by qualified carbon accountants? If we have unveiled some or redone some physical risk assessments, do we want to audit the model, anything like that? And that's how often they are meeting. I have here, I'll send this out to everybody, some sample agendas that you might use, both for a board meeting review of this sort of risk, what you might discuss, the high level metrics you might want to bring in, examples, what you're doing around mitigation efforts, updates on regulatory frameworks and what's happening around the world. So this is kind of a board level agenda. And a management level agenda, especially if you're meeting monthly or even quarterly, as opposed to the board meets quarterly or maybe annually, you might want to get into a little bit more detail. So, what is each department doing? How does the HR department handle something differently than the COO's team, differently than the legal team? What budget are we going to put towards something, right, to making a little bit more of those tactical decisions? So, that's a little bit about the board and management. Let's go through a couple of examples. So, really quickly, we have this new tool or free service, beehiveclimate.com/TCFD library, and you'll be able to see dozens of TCFD reports from all these companies. Any one of them, you can filter and say, show me all the US companies in the technology industry who have published a report in 2024, and here's a bunch of them, and you click in and see that. So it could be a useful resource for you all as you begin to think about what you're supposed to disclose. But I want to just look at four disclosures really quickly. We're going to look at GitHub, Salesforce, Expedia, and HubSpot. So GitHub, let's zoom in here. Very simple answers. They talked about how the nominating governance committee has review over this. They send you to a corporate governance section in another report, and then they actually name. They talk about the ESG team and say that there's oversight from the chief legal officers. It's a very, very simple disclosure. Salesforce goes a little bit further. So they talked about how three of their seven committees of the board have identified climate related areas of oversight. So they have really a lot of commitment here. Um, they bring sustainability goals into their annual organizational alignment process. So that's really relevant. And then if we go further on, they actually give you a fancy little chart of who's on their board, what each committee does, and how their oversight changes. So the non-gov committee oversees the ESG initiatives. This is how often they meet. And this is what they do. The audit committee oversees the corporate accounting financial process, which includes how ESG topics get brought into the finances. So these are just examples of what Salesforce has done, and they talk quite a bit about this. Expedia, also a very simple, kind of like GitLab, very simple disclosure. The board of directors, specifically the executive committees that include the vice chairman and the CEO, provide oversight of this. And it looks like annually, the chief people and inclusion officer updates everybody. And then on the management side, they kind of talk about their global impact and sustainability team and name a few of the people involved in there. So similar, sort of simple disclosure. The last one I want to touch on is HubSpot. I think they do a couple of interesting things. First is that they actually talk about how a member of their board undertook a climate leadership certificate program, which gave the board more expertise about climate risk. So I thought that was really amazing. There's a little less related to the board, a little more management, but 100% of new hires have completed a sustainability training course, and they call that out specifically. And when you go to the actual disclosure, and that's sort of like in a preamble. When you go to the actual disclosure, they go much deeper. So they talk about the non-gov committee and how they review it, and what they actually do, how the job there is to bring to the attention of the board these emerging trends and issues that might be relevant to them. It's really highlighting the things that are most important. And again, they kind of re-highlight again that a member of the board undertook a leadership certificate program. In the management section, they talk about quite a lot. They talk about how there's formal quarterly updates, and they talk about how the different committees work on this together and review these things differently. They talk about who is responsible for this, specifically the sustainability team, and some of that they go into some details there. So those are a few examples. So let's talk about how BI helps. So if you don't have an established ESG committee or your board has never ever looked at this, we'll help you put some of that stuff together. So we'll help tell you, here's the kinds of people who should be on your ESG steering committee or whatever you want to call it. Here's what those topics of conversation need to look like for your board. Here's when you should bring this to them. Don't bring it too early. Here's what that presentation looks like. Once you've done that, or if you already have this sort of work, you can enter all the relevant people into here, into the software. So you'll say, here's who's on my NavGov committee, here's who's on my audit committee, here's who's on my ESG steering committee. We can create those committees together if we want. We can create a new audit committee here. Maybe we'll add these two people to it, and we'll say they're on the board and that they have climate risk oversight. Voila. So there you go. And then maybe the audit committee meets annually or so about these issues. So you're able to add that kind of stuff. So that's great. We set up governance, nice and easy. What happens next is actually publishing this TCFT report. And what's really cool is that the AI is going to take all the information we already have about you. It's going to take the information that you input into the governance tab. It's going to take information that we took out of your charters. If you uploaded your board charters into here, it's going to take what is the guidelines for reporting on this. And you'll be able to answer both the board question and the question about management very, very quickly, very, very easily. That first draft will get drafted for you. And all this takes a second. And this is like per the rules of the TCFD, keeps you compliant. I'll save this for now. And then what's really cool is that you probably always want to understand how your peers are disclosing. So normally you might go around looking for 20 different of your peers and who is the TCFD report for, where do they put it, how's it disclosed. But in here, if you compare yourself to Workday, here's how Workday answered both these questions. You want to just out of curiosity see how we talked about HubSpot a little bit. Here's how HubSpot answered both these questions. If you want to go totally out of industry and for some reason want to see how Jack in the Box answered these questions, we can see here how Jack in the Box answered these questions. So it becomes a very easy way to actually organize your governance work, publish the disclosure you need to do, engage with your ESG steering committee on a monthly basis and your board on a quarterly or annual basis, because you'll be able to take all the information out of Beehive, all the physical risk review, the transition risks, and actually bring it directly to those committees as relevant. So we went through that very quickly, but I said it would be a straightforward topic. I'm happy to pause for any questions. I'll just sit around here quietly for a minute or two, and if there's any questions, we can talk about them. And if not, then I appreciate everyone's time, and it was always good to make this tight. The chat is open and the Q&A is open. So if anyone has a question, please chime right in. Someone asked, yes, the recording will be available. So we'll send that out right after we hang up here. There we go. I'm glad you like the software as well. All right, we can pause there. I appreciate everybody. I'll send you all a recording soon. And next week we are interviewing Sam Hartstock, the founding partner of QB Consulting, which is going to be very exciting. And then the week after that is a deep dive into the BI product. And then 2 weeks after that are going to be awesome. We're interviewing, I believe this is June 12th, if my math is correct, the chief sustainability officer of Apollo Global Private Equity. And then the week after that, the sustainability lead at DocuSign. So some very cool things coming up, and hope to see you there.